Hi, welcome to Mill's Pets Podcast. Before I get started, I wanted to give some disclaimers about this story. First, I am not a clickbaiter, so the title, My Cat Saved My Life, isn't intended as clickbait. But of course, I can't 100% for sure say that she saved my life, so much as I felt like that's where things were headed. And you can decide for yourself when you hear what happened. Also, part of making this is selfish. I don't want to have to explain what just happened to me over and over to friends and family. I thought about writing a long email, but listening to me explain it might be more tolerable than reading an unending wall of text. This is my pets channel, so I don't like to appear on here. Plus, this just happened and I'm sick. And I don't want to have to force Minnie to appear here either. To be perfectly honest, she wouldn't agree to even if I paid her in treats. So I'm making this a podcast instead. That being said, I'm going to be showing a couple of medical images, but I'll let you know when they're on the screen and off so you can close your eyes if you don't want to see them. So let's start this story. Minnie was a rescue kitten who is now 11 years old. When I was in the process of adopting her, one of the shelter volunteers said, "Her mom is wild." I thought that was so strange and random, but in hindsight, I realized she might have been hinting around to warn me. Minnie had no off button or nap button for about the first 2 years of her life, but would go around getting into trouble and breaking things while not wanting to be around me. Vets struggled with her too. I would cry at times. I even have a permanent scar from her. We have quite the history. But I shared on this channel in the past that she has a sense of when I'm very sick, and she cares. For months, I had an unusual depression in my dominant pointer finger. I'm going to show this image on the screen. In my opinion, if you're open to it, I think this is important to look at, especially if you are older or have older family members, since this condition is more common in people older than I am. It's something I dismissed, but was much more important than I realized. I chose to ignore it for months, as you can tell from how it grew over time. On September 18, 2025, my finger was red and swollen to the point of being immobile. I was in extreme pain. There's another photo on the screen showing my finger at its worst, not that same day. I have been unable to use this finger properly since then, and am making this podcast on October 15, nearly a month later. Okay, the screen should be free from gross photos now. My doctor, sadly, was not in that day. The doctor I saw instead made various mistakes that I don't need to fully go into. I will say that a subsequent doctor encouraged me to reach out and inform him of the mistakes. One was giving me only 5 days of an antibiotic that would not work on the type of infection I have. Another was really putting off referring me to a specialist. I was later informed this was an urgent situation. This doctor did guess right, though. He felt that my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome had caused me to get arthritis. Arthritic spurs can cause something called a mucus cyst that can press down on your nail bed, creating a dent. This cyst had then gotten infected. I was eventually referred to a specialist and went to see him on September 30. By then, I had had an untreated infection for quite some time. He prescribed 2 weeks of a different antibiotic. Part of the problem is that my finger needs surgery to remove the cyst and bone spurs, but I can't have surgery unless the infection is gone, so this has created a huge issue and urgency to take care of the infection. This is my dominant finger, and I can't do things I love to do, like crafts and playing most musical instruments, things like that. It has been hard to do even basic, necessary tasks. This antibiotic wasn't agreeing with me very well, but like lots of people, I was trying to power through and I only had a few days left. I have been unable to use my finger and in lots of pain, so obviously I had a lot of motivation to get rid of the infection. I remember one of the first signs about how bad the antibiotic was agreeing with me was my brother was helping me with a doctor appointment and errands, and at the last stop I said, "I need to go home." I suddenly felt horribly ill. I was near passing out and close to vomiting. I was grateful I had a shopping bag to put in my lap and struggled not to throw up in his car the whole ride home. Nausea and severe fatigue were the main signs something was wrong. It seemed every time I took a dose, I would get just a bit sicker, but I kept a little timer going every 12 hours to keep on a strict regimen and took those doses on autopilot. I also developed a fever and grew more and more tired and had to force myself to do anything. On October 11, my fever was pretty high for me, and I don't think I was thinking super clearly by this point. But I did have the mental awareness to email my sister-in-law that I might need to go to the hospital. I recall crying in bed, just crying and begging to go home. And by that I mean the big upstairs, to be with my mom and Spanky, my dear Senegal parrot who I lost earlier this year. Because I'm such a conscientious person, I then felt guilty and prayed about how I should have said I wanted to be with my dad and other pets too. Can't leave them out. I had completely lost my will to keep trying because I felt so incredibly sick. I then decided to try and sleep, and I would have possibly not gotten up until the alarm went off for my next dose hours later. If that had happened, I would have gone on autopilot to take the next dose because I was trying to dutifully take them. This is when Minnie enters the story. So I went to sleep and I was pretty out of it. At one point, I think Minnie must have been on the bed headboard or something. She started sniffing very heavily around my head and batting to wake me up. Because she did that, I jolted awake and knew something was wrong. Minnie has that sixth sense. Possibly she smells something different about me when I'm extra sick. Anyway, I knew to believe her that something needed immediate attention. I woke up and saw rashes all over my arms and took my temperature. My fever, I believe, was 101.8. I know that may not be super high for everyone, but I run low and that's very high for me. I hate going to the hospital, but I contacted my sister-in-law and she took me. I recall the first doctor who saw me did medical gaslighting, which I did want to mention because it was bad. Basically, he asked why I was in there. I said, I have a fever and rashes all over my arms. That is literally why I went in, those rashes. I know people who have had sepsis, and when you have an infection for an extended period of time, that was my main concern. He replied almost with disgust, "You don't have rashes on your arms." Well, it turns out I have a full body rash. When he came back in later, I tried to show him rashes on my stomach. And then he was like, "Why didn't you show this to me before?" I just thought that was so odd. I mean, if you tell me I don't have rashes and I do, maybe look inside yourself. I don't know. I thought it was weird. There was one more doctor who was a bit unusual, but I felt everyone else was nice. Anyway, I was surprised after being admitted to the hospital that everyone started wearing masks around me. It was really surreal. Anyone who came in was required to wear a mask, and of course, I was running a fever, so things seemed odd anyway. They also gave me odd rules, like no fresh fruit and no one could bring me flowers. Basically, I have two serious conditions. One is called neutropenia, and it's when you have a very low white blood cell count. Mine went as low as 1.0. The other one is thrombocytopenia, and that is low platelet count. Mine went as low as 55. I also still have a lovely finger infection, although they tried other antibiotics, and I think I'm on at least the fifth total. Also, I have a full body rash, which is now itchy, which is just lovely. But what caused this, right? Well, the antibiotic. It turns out I had had an unusual and severe reaction to the antibiotic. I bragged about Minnie multiple times to the people at the hospital. Minnie kept me from taking just one more dose. I don't know what one more dose would have done to me. I feel like I was at the end of being mentally there enough to make a decision to go to the hospital, and I don't know what one more dose would have done because I felt my fever and fatigue were getting worse with each dose. Obviously, I didn't know what it was doing to my white blood cell count and platelets. One of the doctors said that if I had continued to take the antibiotic, I was possibly headed towards sepsis. And that is why I say Minnie saved my life. She sensed something unusual was going on, which I wasn't aware of, and she kept me from taking yet one more dose of something that was literally poisoning me. I came home on October 13, but I'm in recovery and I still have the finger infection. This story isn't over. But Minnie is definitely a hero. Minnie, who has mellowed these past 11 years and now likes being around me. I feel like I was ready to go home to be with my family who has gone before, but Minnie wasn't ready for me to go home. And she, for 11 years now, has been the boss of the household, so what she says goes. I hope by sharing my story, I might be able to help others. First of all, if you ever notice a similar indentation in your fingernail or in someone who is older, for me, I just am lucky enough to have a health condition and get it younger, but it's not something to ignore. And definitely don't wait until there's an infection. Second, it's important to know that we shouldn't always push through with antibiotics. They can have rare and very serious side effects, and we need to be aware of that when taking them. My third point is don't give up on your pets. I think a lot of people would have given up on Minnie. She was so very hard to raise. I often cried. I would have never guessed that 11 years later she would pull me out of a dangerous situation. And that's my story. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.